you're doing well. We're very excited to have you with us on this episode at the L&D show. And we're very excited that you're going to share with us your experience and your knowledge in leadership and coaching. Nicky actually has so many years of experience in leadership development and helping organizations to build effective leaders. So why don't you start with introducing yourself, your profile, your background, and your company, what you do.
That's great. Thank you, Dina. And it's a real privilege to be here as well. So I've been working in the leadership development field really for more than 16 years and have had a company developing leaders since 2004, which seems like a long, long, long time now. And it's very much based on people are absolutely wonderful, awesome human beings and have incredible strengths and also very specific values, things that are important to them. And if we want to get the best out of people, those two things alone, focusing on their strengths and focusing on what's meaningful and fulfilling for them, their high priority values, will actually mean that you're using up that great potential that they have to perform at their best. And that's really what we want for our leaders. That's what we want for ourselves at the end of the day. So the work that I do with my team is very much about focusing on people's strengths and focusing on what gives them meaning and what is fulfilling for them in terms of work, in terms of tasks, to get the best out of them.
I also know that you worked a lot with coaching, and you coach many people and many executives and many employees. And usually they say that coaching is not about the past performance, but it's more of unlocking people's talents and hidden potentials. So from your experience, what might be some of the obstacles that might limit a person to perform at his or her best in any organization?
Yeah. So when we think about the barriers and the obstacles that are in the way, if you think about when you perform really at your best, what are the things that you need to perform at your best? If you think about you doing a great job now interviewing me, there are probably things that you need in place in order to really bring that full talent, that full potential into this interview right now. And the opposite of that is really about the obstacles and the barriers that are placed in our way when we're in organisations. And Gallup did a really good piece of research around this last year, and they found 7 things that were really important to help people perform at their best. And like I say, if you turn that on its head, you then get the obstacles and the barriers that get in the way of people performing at their best. So the first one was around having clear expectations. We all need to understand what's expected of us in a situation. The second one is about having the resources that we need in order to be able to do things to the best of our experience, our knowledge, and our potential. We need to be given an opportunity to do what we do best. And that really fits with what's truly meaningful and fulfilling for us. Not doing things that we may find really boring or switch us off in some way. We want to make use of what is an intrinsic motivation for us, what is an internal motivation for us, rather than relying on motivating people with rewards and punishment. Recognition and praise are really important. My manager, if they seem to care about you, that's really important. And also having opportunities to grow. So those are the 7 things that we know that really help an individual perform to their best. And the flip side of that is the obstacles and the things that get in the way so that people don't perform to their best. But underneath all of that is if you are doing something that is meaningful and fulfilling for you, It doesn't matter if you haven't got all the resources that you require. It doesn't matter that you're not being recognized for doing a good job, because it's something that is truly meaningful and fulfilling for you, and you will do it regardless.
Yeah.
And so, if we can actually find those things and understand what's truly meaningful and fulfilling for somebody, and then align their roles with that, or maybe there are things that they need to do within their job, certain tasks that aren't that meaning and fulfilling to them. But if we can link it to something that is meaningful and fulfilling, then we'll actually find that they are intrinsically motivated. They don't need the rewards and the punishments of motivation. So if I think about me, what's meaningful and fulfilling for me is development, personal development, and also developing other people, particularly around leadership. And the third thing would be around having my own business and kind of being in control of my own life. Now, anything that combines those three things, I'm going to be doing without any kind of motivation whatsoever. But if you ask me to do something outside of that, for example, going to the gym on a regular basis, that is not something I find meaningful and fulfilling. So I have to motivate myself really hard to do that, because it doesn't come naturally to me. It's not a high priority value for me. So understanding people's high priority values makes a significant difference, and operating from that place to their performance and using all of their potential.
Great. So usually in any organization, we have a leadership or management hierarchy. So we have at the top of the hierarchy, we have our managing director, we have the executive team, and then we have the middle managers, then we have the first line managers, and so on. From your experience, which level of hierarchy or of leadership is struggling the most or being pressured the most, and why?
If you asked any layer that you mentioned there, who's struggling the most, who's under the most pressure, they would say me. And the pressures are different, aren't they? You're under a completely different set of pressures as a managing director or a CEO of an organization than you are dealing with customers, and being somebody that has a much more operational role. So it's difficult to say which level of the organization has the most pressure, because they're all under pressure, but it's a different kind of pressure that you experience at each of those different levels. But the one thing that we do know is that when we look at turnover of staff, people don't leave organizations, they don't leave companies, they leave managers. And Forbes did a really great piece of research a few years back now, and they found that when they interview people and ask people, why did you leave? 75% of them said, because of my boss. I didn't get on with my boss, or I wasn't getting the support that I was looking for from my boss. And so, if we want our organizations to be successful and we want to retain people, if I think about the question that you've asked about where's the most pressure within the organization, if we think about it in terms of wanting to retain talent in organizations, then we've really got to look at people managers and make sure that our people managers are managing in a way that retains the talent within the organization. So maybe people managers, if we look at it in this way, are under the most amount of pressure right now.
So yeah, you're talking about managers being good managers, and I think they should be also good leaders. So how can they become better leaders to retain people and to kind of avoid all those obstacles?
Yeah. So, so what I would say is it's about being you. understanding yourself and being you. You know, if there's something that we've learned through this whole experience with the pandemic, is that people crave authenticity. They're not looking for you to be something or somebody that you're not. So a lot of the time what we tend to do is we compare ourselves to others, and we either think, oh, that person is so much better than me because they can stand up in public and talk eloquently to an audience, a really big audience, you know, and make them laugh. You know, we might do a comparison like that, and see ourselves as one thing. We might do a comparison with somebody else and see that we're better than them. And all those comparisons are not particularly helpful, because what we're doing is we're either putting people on pedestals and saying we're not as good as them, and therefore we don't feel that we are good enough. And that drives a certain set of behaviors around how we then react and respond to situations. And the other side of it is when we put people in the pit and we don't see them as being as good as us, then we treat them differently too. So what you want to do is actually just be you and recognize how awesome you really are. So there's that side of it, which is about being really authentic. And the other side of it is really about getting to know and understand the people that you manage.
Mhm.
What makes them tick? What's truly important to them? What's meaningful and fulfilling for them? And making best use of those strengths and that understanding, and making sure that people are working on projects and working on tasks that really fit with their high priority values.
Mhm. So, speaking of the pandemic, so things have changed a lot, and I'm sure leadership also has evolved. So, what are some of the new competencies or skills that our leaders need to acquire now during and after the pandemic?
You know, I think the most interesting thing about what happened with the pandemic, and it's not really the pandemic, but it's the lockdowns. So when we had the lockdowns and people needed to work from home, you know, one of our clients, a very big bank, they um, up until up until recently, well, up until March 2020, they had been talking about remote working. You know, how can we help our people work remotely from home or wherever they want to work? And they'd had these big debates for about 3 years. And they were worried about security because it's a bank. You know, if you think about the security issues of running a bank, you've got all that personal information, you've got all that financial information. There's a lot of issues that need to be resolved. But when the pandemic came about and suddenly people were forced to, organizations were forced to make sure that people could work remotely, work from home, they had 48 hours in which to do that. So, what had been going on for 3 years, those conversations, suddenly they resolved within 48 hours. So, in a way, what we've learned is that we can solve problems a whole lot quicker than we think we can. And when we're in a crisis situation, there's almost like a switch. We kind of switch into that crisis mode, and it's amazing how much of our potential comes to the fore, and we resolve things really, really quickly. So that's one thing that we've seen, that actually we can solve problems far faster than we originally thought. And in a crisis, that's exactly what we do well as human beings. The second thing that we've seen is we've seen into people's lives. So we've seen the CEO sitting at a desk in his home, his or her home, and we've seen kids run in, you know, and we've seen family life. We've seen what's behind that desk. So we've seen into people's lives in a way that we've not seen before. And so there's a very human connection that comes as a result of that. And there's no going back from these experiences. You know, when you've experienced a very almost intimate conversation with our leaders in the organizations, and you've seen what family life is like for them, you've seen into their homes. You know, we've all been dressing more casually as a result of remote working. So there are some big shifts that have happened from this whole experience, and a real craving to keep that authenticity, to keep that reality, that vulnerability of seeing what's going on in people's lives, that understanding, that compassion. So those things are what we're taking into leadership moving forward from this place, and I just think that's a great thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always something positive that comes out of the crisis. Uh, so a leader usually deals with a group of people, right? And this group of people might be very diverse. You might have people coming from different age groups, different, nationalities, backgrounds. So how can a leader become more inclusive and embrace this diversity? And what do we really mean by an inclusive leader?
Yeah, that's a really big question right there. And the reason when we talk about inclusive leadership and the inclusive leader, it's really about being aware of our own biases and preferences, and going out of our way to actively seek out and consider different perspectives and different views on things. And that really helps us make better decisions. So when we're talking about inclusivity and we're talking about diversity and equality, what we're really looking for is we're looking for that diversity in terms of how we look at things, in terms of our backgrounds, in terms of our experiences. And it's about being really open to seeing things from a different perspective. And coaching is really great for this as well, in terms of helping people see things from a different perspective. So you can get that perspective from different people coming together and working together on a project. And you can also get that perspective from asking really great questions. And by asking really great questions, a better question, you're starting to remove some of the blind spots that we have, because our experiences have been quite narrow. It's about broadening out that perspective, broadening out and seeing different viewpoints. So by asking a better question, asking about what am I missing here, can help us make better informed decisions, because we're starting to question our assumptions, question our biases, and question our preferences, and bring in that diverse view, which is really crucial to seeing things and making different and better decisions.
So, today's business environment is rapidly changing, and as they say, that change is the only constant in life. So, how leaders can better manage change? And from your own experience, how did you help leaders and managers lead change within their teams?
Yeah, and it really goes back to that diversity and inclusion piece again, you know, and about questioning our biases and our preferences and our assumptions. Because very often what happens is there's something called confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is when we have a particular opinion, viewpoint, and we believe it's right. And what our minds do is we look for confirmation that we are right. And anything that doesn't fit that version, we exclude. So what we end up doing is confirming our bias and not seeing the opposite. So one of the things that we need to do when we're going through a change or we're going through a transformation as an organization is just recognize that people are going to have confirmation bias going on. And it's that bit about asking better questions to help people understand what's the flip side of this. or maybe taking a scientific approach, and instead of looking for confirmation that we're right, the scientific approach looks for proof that we're wrong. So if you can flip it on its head and kind of look for where's the evidence that this thinking is wrong, rather than where's the evidence that I'm right, then that really helps in a change situation. The other thing that happens, and this is why quite a lot of people talk about resistance to change, it's about a natural emphasis that we have on what we're losing rather than what we're gaining. You know, if I think about people that have been made redundant, for example, if you talk to them when they've actually first heard, okay, I'm very sorry, we're going to have to let you go, they are really, really upset, and they are completely focused on what they're losing. You know, they're losing security. We all like to feel that we're secure in some way, that we're safe, but it's an illusion. You know, there is no such thing as security. It is an illusion, but we like to believe that we are safe and secure. So the first thing that goes through somebody's mind when they are being made redundant is all the things that they are losing: the security of the paycheck, all those things. But if you had a conversation with that person a little while later, they'll often say to you, you know, that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because now I'm doing this and I love it. And so when we're going through a big change in an organization, one of the things that we need to remember is that people will naturally put an emphasis on what they're losing, and they won't necessarily see what they're gaining. So we want to put an emphasis on what we're gaining. And you can't do this in terms of, well, you know, this is going to be great for our customers. Imagine how great our customers are going to feel if we make this change, whatever the change may be. It's got to be what's in it for me. And that means for the individual that you're talking to. So the individual in your team, you've got to understand from their perspective what's going to be the gain for them and help them see that gain. And that's why we focus on all the great change leaders and transformation leaders will often talk about quick wins to get momentum. And that's really important. If we can see where we can get quick wins, where we can see we're making progress, and again, it's about those gains instead of the losses. People can see that they've gained something that is meaningful and fulfilling for them, then that really deepens the momentum, and we can move even quicker into that change or into that transformation. Going through that change process and that transformation is one thing, but the other thing is actually maintaining the changes. So those changes are going to become habits. So understanding the psychology of people, because it's people that make up organizations. You know, organizations and companies, we're reliant on people and what people do and bring to the table. So we have to understand how habits are formed and make sure that those new behaviors that are associated with the change become habits. And then once we've done that, we've actually moved on into a new way of doing things, just like we have with remote working and people working from home. You know, that very quickly became a habit. And now we're seeing people moving back into offices and the hybrid way of working, you know, and we're going to see some new habits and new behaviors around this as well.
Yeah, and they always say the power of habits. So yeah, you can't really change a habit once it's there. So yeah, our interview is coming to an end. But my final question is, what final advice would you give to any manager who's watching us now, and he or she is leading a group of people or a team?
Yeah, so I guess it would be give yourself permission to be you and really understand yourself, you know, and what makes you tick. Because by understanding and being aware of the things that are really meaningful and fulfilling for you, will help you understand what is meaningful and fulfilling for your individual team members. You know, understanding a little bit about the psychology of people will really help you too. And then using great questions, using great coaching questions, which are really open questions, like asking the question, what am I missing here? What am I not seeing? What are the assumptions that I am making here? And really encouraging people that have diverse perspectives to you, really encouraging a conversation to better understand what that perspective is about. I can remember, I've worked with a lot of CEOs over the years, and there's a CEO that really stands out who did this really, really well. He would recognize when he had a manager that was a bit of an oddball, that didn't completely fit, that was a little bit like a pearl in the oyster, you know, the grit in the oyster that kind of creates the pearl. It's agitating, it's frustrating for a number of people around them because they don't fit with the culture of the team, but they're an oddball and see things differently, and because of that are incredibly valuable. So no matter how difficult the conversation seems to be right at the beginning, getting them to talk about how they see things can really add value to how we see things, and how we can go from, if you like, seeing things two-dimensionally to seeing things three-dimensionally and actually making better decisions. So it's about, so I would really encourage people to gain that awareness about themselves, which will really help in understanding what makes people tick in general and understand their team members. Really understand what's meaningful and fulfilling, high priority values for both you and your team members. And like I say, I have a process that can help with that, which is 13 questions. Doesn't have to be long-winded, but it would help you with that. And the other thing is looking for that diverse perspective, that diverse viewpoint, and really taking the time to understand that different perspective and the added value that it brings, so that it can help you make better decisions. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Nikki, for joining us. It was a pleasure. Thank you.